If you're prepping for the UPSC exams, you know the Indian Constitution is way more than just a rule book. It's the foundational blueprint for the entire country, the world's largest democracy. So in this explainer, we're going to break down its most important features, giving you that clear, structured understanding you absolutely need to ace your exams.
So, here's our game plan. First, we're going to tackle its massive size. Then, we'll look at how the world inspired its design. After that, we'll unpack its very unique blend of flexibility and rigidity, explore its quasi-federal structure, dive into the core promises it makes to every citizen, and finally, we'll wrap up by looking at its legacy. Ready? Let's get into it.
All right, first up, the sheer scale of our Constitution. You'll often hear it called elephantine, and trust me, that's for a very good reason. It is, by a long shot, the longest written constitution of any country on Earth.
And that, of course, brings us to the big question, one that you'll definitely see come up. Why? I mean, what possessed the framers to create such a massive, detailed document? Let's break down exactly why.
Just look at the numbers here. This slide paints a really clear picture of its growth. I mean, it was already a giant when it was adopted back in 1949, but over more than 75 years of amendments, it's gotten even bigger. We've added new articles, new parts, and new schedules, all to keep up with the nation's changing needs.
So what's behind this massive size? Well, it really boils down to four key things. First off, India's incredible geographical vastness and diversity meant we needed detailed rules for everything. Second, there's the historical angle. The Government of India Act of 1935 was itself a huge document, and it became the basic skeleton. Third, unlike the US, we have just one constitution for both the Union and all the states. And finally, you have to remember, the Constituent Assembly was packed with brilliant legal minds, and well, lawyers tend to be very, very thorough.
Okay, let's move on to our second big feature. The Indian Constitution wasn't just invented out of thin air. Nope, its framers looked all across the globe, drawing inspiration from different constitutional traditions to build something that was perfectly suited for India.
And you know this quote from Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the chairman of the drafting committee? Wow, it just says it all. He wasn't shy about it. They literally ransacked the world's constitutions to find the best features and then adapted them to solve India's unique problems.
Now this table, this is pure gold for your revision notes. You can see the biggest influences at a glance. From the UK, we got the parliamentary system we were already familiar with. From the USA, we borrowed those crucial ideas of fundamental rights and judicial review. Ireland gave us the framework for the Directive Principles, or DSP. Canada's model showed us how to have a federation with a strong central government. And from the former USSR, we took inspiration for the ideals of justice in our preamble and the concept of fundamental duties.
All right, next up is something truly fascinating about our Constitution, this unique blend of being both rigid and flexible at the same time. It's really an art of synthesis, a very deliberate balancing act.
To really get why India's approach is so special, you first need to look at the two extremes out there. You have the US Constitution, which is famously rigid. Changing it is an incredibly tough process. And on the complete other end of the spectrum, you have the British Constitution, which is so flexible it can be changed by Parliament just like passing any old law. Our framers wanted to avoid both of these paths.
So what did India do? It created this beautiful synthesis. The idea was to have a document that was solid enough to prevent it from being changed on a whim by a temporary majority, but also flexible enough to evolve as the nation grew. It's a living, breathing document, not some static relic.
So how does this actually work in the real world? Well, there are 3 different ways to amend the Constitution, and you can see them here. Some parts can be changed by a simple majority vote in Parliament, just like an ordinary law. That's the flexible part. But other, more important parts require a special majority. That's 2/3 of the members present and voting. And then, for the most critical stuff that affects the federal structure, you need that special majority plus the approval of at least half of the state legislatures. That's the rigid part.
Okay, now we're getting into the core architecture of the Indian state. The Constitution sets up a federal system, but, and this is a huge but, it has a very strong unitary spirit. This is a concept you absolutely have to nail down.
If you look here, you can see this dual nature laid out perfectly. On the one hand, you've got all the classic signs of a federation. 2 levels of government, a clear division of powers, a written constitution, all that good stuff. But on the other hand, the unitary features are really powerful. A very strong central government, a single constitution for everyone, single citizenship, and things like the All India services.
And here are the buzzwords you need to remember for your exams. Political scientists often call India quasi-federal. What does that mean?
It means that while the structure, the form, looks federal, the spirit of it is unitary, with power tilted heavily towards the Union government. Now let's get to what I think is really the soul of the Constitution, the promises it makes to its people. This is all captured in this powerful trio of fundamental rights, directive principles, and fundamental duties.
This is a really critical distinction to understand. Fundamental rights, found in Part 3, are justiciable. That means you can actually go to a court and have them enforced. They're your political rights. But the directive principles in Part 4 are non-justiciable. Think of them as a moral compass for the government. They outline social and economic goals, but you can't sue the state for not following them.
So what are we talking about here? Well, the Constitution gives us 6 main categories of fundamental rights. Everything from the right to equality and freedom to the right against exploitation. And crucially, it includes the right to constitutional remedies under Article 32, which is this amazing tool that lets any citizen go directly to the Supreme Court to protect their rights.
Now here's a little tidbit that is prime material for prelims, so pay attention. The fundamental duties were not in the original Constitution from 1950, not at all. They were added much later, in 1976, during the emergency. It's a great reminder that our Constitution is an evolving document, constantly being updated.
All right, to finish up, let's step back and take a balanced look at the Constitution's legacy. Because while it's rightly celebrated as this incredible achievement, it has also faced its fair share of criticism. And for a complete analysis, you need to know both sides.
You'll often hear critics call it a bag of borrowings, basically saying it's just a patchwork quilt with no originality. Its massive size is also a point of criticism, with some calling it a lawyer's paradise because it's so complex. And back in the day, some even argued it was un-Indian, claiming it was based on Western models and ignored India's own traditions.
But, there's a really powerful comeback to that criticism, and it comes from Dr. Ambedkar himself. He took on that bag of borrowings argument head-on. He basically said that the fundamental ideas of a constitution are universal, they don't have a copyright. What mattered, he argued, was not being original for its own sake, but adapting those universal ideas to fit India's unique needs.
And that really leaves us with a big question to think about. After more than 75 years of change, of court battles, of massive societal shifts, is our Constitution still a living, breathing text that guides us? Or is it slowly becoming a historical relic? The answer to that question really defines its ultimate legacy. Thanks so much for joining me.